In October 2017, I developed a tingling sensation in my stomach. At first, I thought it was just a temporary discomfort and tried to deal with it myself. I went to the pharmacy and bought antacids. For the first few days, the medication seemed to have some effect, but my symptoms quickly worsened. I started to feel nauseous and my appetite disappeared. Over the next few days, I felt weaker and weaker because I hadn't eaten properly for almost a week. One night, my breathing also started to become difficult, which made me very worried. My husband realized that the situation was very serious and immediately took me to the emergency room. When we arrived at the hospital, I felt my breathing was becoming more and more difficult, which was very frightening to me. I could no longer walk, and I felt like I didn't have enough oxygen in my lungs anymore. In this situation, my husband immediately sought the help of the medical staff. A nurse saw my condition and she very quickly found a wheelchair for me. The nurse put me in the wheelchair and pushed me toward the emergency room. I remember what it was like. I felt a great heaviness in my chest. I tried to breathe deeply, but it didn't feel like oxygen was getting into my lungs. I was immediately placed in a bed. The doctors diagnosed and treated my symptoms. They gave me some oxygen to relieve my breathing difficulties and then performed a series of tests. Many doctors and nurses surrounded me. They put N4 in me. I felt my heartbeat become abnormally fast. My body gradually lost its strength and began to become cold. My vision began to become blurred and the sounds around me faded away. I felt like I was pinned to the bed, unable to move. Suddenly, I felt my soul begin to leave my body, as if an invisible force was pulling me upward. I was being drawn by a powerful force, and I no longer had control over my body. I began to float upward, as if I were floating alone in the dark night sky. In this unknown realm, everything became very peaceful and beautiful. I was surrounded by a very soft light, and this light made me feel very warm. All my worries and pains disappeared here. In this space, I felt that I was not alone and that a mysterious force was guiding and protecting me. Suddenly, I appeared in a room made of stone walls, where the atmosphere was somewhat ancient and mysterious. The room looked like the great hall of a medieval castle. In the center of the room was a long wooden table. There were 3 white plates on the table, one on either side of the table. One was at the end of the table, which looked very striking. The table was decorated with cutlery and goblets that looked exquisite. I noticed 2 rather large bowls in the center of the table, containing some plants I had never seen before. They were very brightly colored and had some strange patterns on their green leaves. I couldn't identify their species, but I could smell a fresh fragrance. I felt very confused and wondered what this place was. Why am I here? There was no one in the room but me. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of me. I was very surprised by his appearance, because the man was Jesus. He was wearing a white robe and holding a golden cross in his hand. I could clearly see his beard and every hair on his head. Jesus' hair was flowing slightly. His beard was neatly trimmed and revealed an air of determination. His eyes were deep and kind, as if they could see into my heart. He smiled at me like a father would do with his own child. His presence brought me an unparalleled peace and tranquility. I asked him, "Why am I here? What is this place?" Jesus smiled and replied, "This is heaven, the home of your soul." I asked Jesus in great confusion, "Am I already dead?" "No, you are not dead, your body is fighting against disease, only your soul has come here." Jesus answered. Jesus went on to tell me not to be afraid. He invited me to sit down next to him. I felt very nervous because I didn't know what was happening or what Jesus would say. He gently patted my hand. His palm was warm and firm, giving me a feeling of reassurance. I gazed into Jesus' face and felt the care and love in his gaze. In his presence, I felt my heart was released and all my pain and worries disappeared. Jesus said to me that he also had a gift for me. His finger pointed to a door nearby. The door was wooden and looked very heavy and old. Slowly, the door opened. My father stepped out of the door. My father died of a heart attack in the year 2008. When I saw him, I was shocked. He looked very young. He wore a simple white robe and no shoes, but his feet were very clean. His smile was warm and kind, as if it took me back to my childhood. He came toward me and hugged me tightly, and I could feel his warmth and love. He told me that he had been watching over me, which was a great comfort to me. Jesus looked at us with a smile and then said to me, "Do you want to try the food here?" I nodded my head. Jesus then picked up a goblet and poured a glass of clear water. I took the goblet and I smelled the water inside. I smelled a fresh odor. As I drank the water, I felt my soul was purified and nourished. I looked closely at the food on the plate and noticed that it was a plant I had never seen before. Its leaves were a dark green color and looked very fresh. When I put it in my mouth, I felt a wonderful taste. It had a light aroma. Its taste was also very unique, with a very sweet taste. I think it was more like a fruit. This food made me feel very satisfied. During this time, my father and I also talked about something from my childhood. My father used to love fishing and he would often take me with him. One time, I went fishing with my father on the beach. At that time, I was only 6 years old, and I was curious about everything. When I bent down to pick up a big shell, my hand got caught in a crab. I started to cry. My father took a pair of scissors out of the fishing tackle box and told me to put my hand over. I was scared and my father told me not to worry. He cut off the crab's claws so I could escape from its trap. Now that I think about it, it was quite funny. Then my father asked me if I wanted to go see where he lives now. I nodded my head. My father took me to a beautiful garden. There were flowers and green trees. I felt very happy, as if all my worries and cares had been blown away. Then, we came to a magnificent palace. It seemed to be built with the most precious materials and the most advanced technology. I was in awe, never having seen such a magnificent building. My father told me that this was where he lived now. Inside the palace there were countless rooms and halls, each beautifully decorated to make people feel incredibly comfortable and warm. When I entered his room, I saw a room full of personal characteristics. There were some of his favorite paintings and photos hanging on the wall, and some ornaments and souvenirs were scattered all over the room. The furniture in the room was made of wood and looked very sophisticated. There was a picture of him and my mother hanging on the bed, which looked very cozy. There was also a bookcase in the room, with many books on history and culture. The whole room looked very neat and cozy. I could feel my father's love for this room. I went to the balcony of the room and I saw many angels in the garden and the square. They were laughing and singing, making people feel happy and joyful. I was very surprised. I never thought heaven would be so beautiful. My father told me that there is no pain and no worries here, only love and peace. Here, everyone can find his or her own joy and happiness. I sat on the balcony with my father for a while. My father told me that although he had left the earth, he would be by my side in another way. Whenever I feel lonely or helpless, I just need to close my eyes, and he will be by my side. His words made me feel warm and comforted, and I knew he would always be there for me to rely on. Suddenly, my soul began to tremble slightly. I knew I had to say goodbye to my father. I turned around and hugged him tightly. I slowly let go of him and he gently patted my shoulder. I told him that I would always remember his love and his teachings. My father smiled and nodded. His eyes filled with love. When I woke up, my consciousness was still a little fuzzy. I had some kind of strange mask on my face and an 4-needle in my body. These strange things made me feel a little sick. My family told me that my kidneys and lungs had begun to fail. If I arrived at the hospital any later, I was afraid I would not survive. I was shocked to hear this news, but at the same time I felt incredibly grateful and lucky. When I told my husband about it, he didn't express any opinion. When the doctor came to my bedside, I couldn't resist telling him about my experience. However, my husband did not agree. He reminded me that I couldn't talk about it anymore, or I would be sent to a psychiatric hospital. Hearing these words, I felt very disappointed and frustrated. I felt that everything I had experienced was real. Now it was considered a manifestation of mental illness, which made me feel very aggravated. I know my husband was concerned, but his words made me feel so helpless. After this incident, my life has become very peaceful. I used to have a lot of anxiety and worry, but those feelings seem to have disappeared. I can feel a sense of inner peace and tranquility. This is a feeling I have never felt before in my life. I used to have the habit of smoking, but since that experience, my desire for nicotine has also disappeared. It was as if I had never smoked before. It's a wonderful change, and I can't imagine myself being able to successfully quit smoking. I am now aware of the importance of life and not wasting my time with something stupid. I try to keep my inner peace and clarity because I know how precious and important this feeling is. This experience has changed the trajectory of my life and made me more mature and stronger. I will keep going to church now, and I am eager to learn more about Christianity. I share my experience with other believers. This experience has also made me more concerned about those who are in distress. I try to bring them some warmth and hope through my story. I believe this is what God wants me to do. This experience made me feel the presence and love of God. I believe this experience is unique, and I hope more people can feel God's love.